Registered Democrats in Arizona have several weeks before they weigh in on the presidential candidates. By then, more than 24 other states will have already had their say. Whether or not those outcomes will sway voters here, we got insight from Samara Klar, a political scientist at the University of Arizona.
So right away, we're going to get a lot of attention in Iowa. But it also recently has a pretty good track record of predicting who the Democratic nominee is going to be. So if you look historically, it predicts about less than half the time. But if you look in the last 20 years, since the year 2000, it's actually predicted the nominee every single year.
All right, after Iowa, then New Hampshire, are these states really representative of what's happening throughout the rest of the country when it comes to politics?
Demographically, these states are not at all representative. I mean, Iowa and New Hampshire are significantly whiter. They're nowhere near as diverse as the rest of the country. They're also older than the rest of the country. So it's not as though they're a microcosm of the country, but rather they give voters a cue as to who's viable and who's not. So part of the reason why we see that the Iowa winner tends to predict the official nominee is because it gives people a heuristic. Well, if voters there like him or her, then maybe this person has a real shot.
In a lot of circles, Arizona is considered this battleground state.
Yeah,
Any indication that Arizona could, move up its place when it comes to primaries and people will start to look at Arizona?
Yes. I mean, I know I said this 4 years ago, and now I believe it even more strongly. Arizona really is becoming a battleground state. I mean, it really hasn't been a traditionally Republican state until about the 80s. And in the last 30 years now, it's been fairly consistently Republican. Not always. We've had a few elections here or there. For example, Bill Clinton won in Arizona. But what we've seen in the last few years is a real influx of Democratic registrants, especially this year. So in July, we had this huge increase in new voters registering in Arizona. The majority of them were registering as Democrats. And another kind of interesting thing, I think, is in the past few months, the majority of registrants have identified with a party, which we haven't typically seen in Arizona. Arizona's been a pretty independent state, and it's actually moving to become a little more partisan. So I think there's a lot of interest here among the candidates and among the campaigns.
Do Arizona Democrats tend to look at these other states, and does it influence their decision making?
Yeah, they do. I mean, in the past several years, Arizona has chosen the same Democratic nominee that Iowa has. One notable exception is that Arizona selected Hillary Clinton over Barack Obama in that primary, whereas Iowa did not. So Arizona voters are potentially a little more conservative among the Democrats than we see in a state like Iowa. But again, that could change also. A lot of our new registrants here are not white. They are not older. They're sort of younger, more diverse voters. So we might see a move to the left. Bernie Sanders has been polling really well in Arizona, for example. And in 2016, Bernie Sanders actually had a few campaigns here in Tucson and throughout the state. So I think we will see some more campaign activity.
As these caucuses continue and the herd gets thinned out, does it change the vote of the Arizonan as things continue to progress? Because we won't be having this conversation until March.
Well, it depends how thin the herd gets. I mean, right now, the popular voters in Arizona are really the big players. Warren, Sanders, Biden is leading in Arizona in most polls. So those ones are probably not going to get out anytime soon. Arizona voters aren't really looking at sort of smaller candidates. But as, Arizona's primary follows Super Tuesday. So by the time we get to Arizona, the herd will have thinned down. I think we're at 11 now. I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona voters have a choice among maybe 6 or 7.
The media, are they playing this up more than it should be? I mean, at the end of the day, is the average voter really watching what happens in Iowa or New Hampshire and saying, that's how I'm going to vote and that's what deserves my attention?
I mean, the average voter is not watching the news all day. The average voter is at work, they're dealing with their kids, they're grocery shopping, they're fixing their leaky pipes, they're dealing with their lives. But Iowa's a really big deal because this is a huge election. Donald Trump is a really polarizing figure. He's consistently been very popular among Republicans. He's consistently been very unpopular among Democrats. So this is a race that a lot of people have a real stake in. I mean, it's an election that matters to a lot of voters, and Iowa's going to be an important signal to a lot of voters throughout the country.
I read that 16% of Iowa voters will actually turn out for a caucus, and that politicians are spending about $50 million this year in Iowa alone. Those numbers don't seem to mesh.
No, I know. It's unbelievable. The amount of money they spend every year just exponentially grows. It gets higher and higher. but this is just seen as such a big signal to them. It's going to give a lot of adrenaline to the campaign that wins for sure, and even to the campaign that comes in second or third.
All right, Dr. Klar, a lot more to look forward to in the coming months.
Thank you so much for having me. It'll be really exciting to see what happens.
Arizona's Democratic presidential preference election is March 17th. The deadline to register to vote is February 18th. Because Arizona Republicans decided not to have a primary, independent voters who want to vote in the primary must register as Democrats. They can switch back after.